Chapter 5, it's interesting to look at the chapter title because it's the same as chapter 3 title, Karma Yoga, Action in Krishna Consciousness. And Arjuna kicks off the chapter with the same question. In a frustrated way, he says, "Hey Krishna, come on, tell me once and for all, what's the best thing for me to do?" And again, he's asking this question because he still hasn't heard the answer that he thought he should. He still hasn't heard from Krishna that you shouldn't fight, you should run away, you should check out, you should quit your job, you should go sit under a tree and silently meditate until everyone else agrees that you're a very spiritual person. This is what Arjuna is hoping that Krishna is going to tell him, but Krishna keeps telling him the opposite. Krishna keeps telling him, you got to get out there, you got to do your duty without attachment to the result and fight. And so in chapter 5, it's titled the same as chapter 3, and what's happening here is Krishna is describing the magic that takes place when we take the actionable advice in chapter 3 and the intention of chapter 4 and we marry them and live our life by those two things. When we understand, as we found out in chapter 3, that we should perform sacrifice or that we should work and endeavor in such a way that's in line with the spiritual scriptures and in harmony with the advice of spiritual teachers. And at the same time, as we learned in chapter 4, we should do that with a positive desire to experience ourselves and our source of divinity, Krishna, both directly. When we do these two things, then the magic of that is described in chapter 5. Suddenly, all of the experiences in life that we've wanted to have, a sense of freedom, a sense of detachment from the result, a sense of fulfillment, a sense of love towards others, all those things happen automatically when we do these two things. We work in a mood of sacrifice and service, and we do so with a desire to experience our relationship with Krishna directly in a mood that pleases Him. And so very famously, the end of the chapter 5, Krishna gives what Srila Prabhupada calls the peace formula verse. Bhoktaram yagyatapasyam, sarva loka maheshwaram, suridam sarva bhutanam. These are three features of himself that Krishna describes to Arjuna, of which Prabhupada says if we understand, if we deeply recognize these three truths about Krishna, all of the anxieties of our life and the lives of others can fade away, and we will genuinely feel a sense of peace, not only in our world, but in society at large. And so what are these three things? Well, the first thing, Bhoktaram Yagya Tapasyam, is to recognize that every endeavor that everyone is making is ultimately for the benefit of Krishna. It's ultimately in line with His desires. And you might ask, how is that possible when things like killing are going on, things like plague and famine and natural disaster are happening? How can awful things like this ultimately be in line with the desires of Krishna? How can people that perpetuate those things actually be doing service for the Supreme? And the truth is that yes, those situations may be difficult and tough, but those difficult and tough situations are very helpful ultimately for helping the soul who are inside the bodies of those people that may be experiencing that temporary suffering to recognize this place is really not for me. This place is not where the all-in-all lies. I have a deeper sense of experience and existence that I feel and yearn for beyond these temporary sufferings and also beyond whatever temporary pleasure I may have been feeling. And I want to get to a place where I'm experiencing that side of myself always. And so in this way, everything that anyone does is ultimately for Krishna's benefit. The second thing Krishna explains to Arjuna is Sarva Loka Maheshwaram, that it's actually I who am in charge of and control all of the planets, all of the countries, all of the worlds within all of existence. And it's funny because if we think about the origin of all war, especially the war that we're familiar with, it's always a land battle. It's always two countries or two people or a group of people saying that they have proprietorship over some piece of land or some part of God's creation. And in actuality, they're missing out that we as jivas, as souls, as people here right now, only have the opportunity to be stewards of God's property for a little while, but that ultimately and eventually everything is controlled and under the jurisdiction of Krishna. And if we recognize that, then that pride that comes, that this is my land, this is my country, this is my energy to control and enjoy, that will be diminished, that will be reduced, deflated, if we can see ultimately all of it belongs to Krishna. And then finally, the third feature is that Krishna is Suridam Sarva Bhutanam. He's everyone's best friend. All the time, always, Krishna is arranging things in a perfect way to help all of us come to a place of genuine happiness. And so again, somebody might ask, well, I've been praying to get a better job, or I've been praying to heal from the sickness or my family member's sickness, or I've been praying that these wars stop, or these national, or rather climactic tragedies end. We may be praying for relief of suffering on this temporary level, but sometimes Krishna wants us to go through those difficulties so that the soul recognizes this attachment that I have to the body is not actually serving me. And so even in this way, helping us experience some temporary tension, Krishna is acting as our best friend. What to speak of when he gives us the things that we want and the things that we ask for. Krishna is always acting in such a way that he's bringing us closer to him and helping us recognize our real identity as spirit souls. So if we recognize these three features, that everything everyone does is actually ultimately for Krishna's benefit, Krishna is in charge of and in control of all the energy within existence, and that he's always manipulating it only for the best interest of each of us as a close friend. When we recognize that, then the anger, frustration, and fear that we experience regularly fades into the background, and we get to experience our genuine spiritual self in service and in love.